8 coordinated explosions happened at several churches and hotel resorts. The attacks targeted worshippers during Easter Sunday services and people staying at 5-star hotels. At least 35 foreigners are believed to be among the dead. They happened at sites in the capital Colombo, 2 suburbs, Deyewela and Dematagoga, near Nagombo, and in the eastern city of Batakaloa. A government official has told this channel that several arrests have been made following a shootout. Our correspondent Manel Fernandez is standing by for us live at the St. Anthony's Shrine, one of the churches attacked in Colombo. And in the next half hour, we'll have multiple reports and reaction. But first, Laura Burden-Manley wraps up the day's main development so far.
One blast so violent, it ripped through the roof of this church in the heart of the capital. The floor covered in remains of the roof, wood and blood. This video posted online shows the moment of the blast. St. Anthony's Church is popular with locals and foreign tourists. After the explosion, shock and disbelief. 3 separate churches bombed on Easter Sunday, one of the major celebrations in the Christian calendar. One witness says the blast was so powerful it shook the surrounding buildings. But it wasn't just Christians targeted. It seems to be a much wider operation.
They are the casualties. We transported them to the National Hospital, and then we have been advised to come to the Shangri-La.
Bombs also ripped through 5-star hotels. In the heart of the capital and all close together are the Shangri-La, Cinnamon Grand and Kingsbury hotels and the St. Anthony's Shrine Church. St. Sebastian Church in Nagombo and Zion Church in Batakaloa were also targeted, and the Tropical Inn Hotel in Deyewela. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says he'll take firm action.
I would like to express my condolences to the families of victims and those injured in the attacks that took place. I strongly condemn these attacks that targeted religious sites and luxury hotels. We will take stern actions against all those who are responsible, regardless of their stature.
This is the largest coordinated string of attacks in Sri Lanka in recent years, and so far, no one has claimed responsibility. For now, ambulance crews rush to treat hundreds of injured people. And with many people dead and widespread damage, the extent of the devastation is being assessed. Laura Burden-Manley, Al Jazeera.
Manel Fernandez joins us from outside the St. Anthony's Shrine, one of the churches attacked in Colombo. So, Manel, what else do we know about these arrests?
What we're hearing is that those arrests took place when law enforcement authorities were following a tip-off, had raided basically a housing complex, again on the outskirts of Colombo, one of the suburbs, and at which point there was an explosion from one of these households. During that, we were hearing that there were 3 police personnel who were killed, and the implications and the reports that we're hearing is that there was some kind of chase or some kind of basically pursuit of some of those believed to be behind these attacks. And as right after that incident, we started hearing about the arrests. The State Defence Minister going on record as saying that 7 people have been arrested so far, Peter.
As to the aftermath of what happened earlier today, there's no easy way to put this. We've got a large death toll. It's getting bigger, and there must be an expectation that it's going to rise still further.
Sadly, that is very much the case, Peter. I mean, even the scenes you see behind me, if you can distinguish the detail, a body of white, basically body bags with all the fatalities here at the St. Anthony's Church in Colombo. Now, all of those killed in the explosion that ripped through the Easter Sunday Mass here this morning, being brought up, being lined up. This was part of the magisterial investigation, but we've also now, in the last hour or so, had families basically lining up near the sort of cordon, the police cordon. They're being taken one by one to begin the painful process of seeing of identifying their loved ones among the dead. We have already had 1 or 2 families that have actually made positive identifications. One young man inconsolable after he found and identified 4 members of his family, his brother, his sister-in-law, their 1-month-old baby, and another family member. So heart-wrenching scenes are still unfolding here in Sri Lanka, Peter.
We can see what's going on there with you, Manel, right now, but there's been no claim of responsibility. Does that mean that the authorities are under a certain pressure to be seen to be investigating this properly and quickly?
Absolutely. I mean, right now the key would be basically to ensure that there are no more explosions, attacks. That's the first priority. And obviously the next one, to try and identify where these were coming from, who is responsible, who were the masterminds behind it, and what exactly transpired. Now, the arrest they're hearing that we heard from the Dhammatakota incident and thereafter offer some sort of glimmer of hope. We don't know whether this will yield all the information, but at least to give the authorities some kind of pointers or leads as to who might be involved and who might be behind this wave of attacks in Colombo and in other parts of the country. So a lot of pressure for the authorities to deliver, to get to the bottom of this, to see what exactly is happening, who's behind it, and to start basically taking action to rope in all of those people and ensure that we don't see any more such incidents. Peter?
Manel, thank you. OK, let's bring in Alan Keenan again out of London. He is the Sri Lanka Project Director at the International Crisis Group. Alan, the scale, the sophistication of this, is this unprecedented here?
Yeah, I think it is. It's, you know, even in the darkest days of the LTTE's campaign of terror against government and sometimes civilian targets, there was never anything like this. So we're in new territory, unfortunately.
Given the length and the ferocity of the civil war conflict there, I mean, we had this conversation in our last hour, but I think it's worth reheating it. The intelligence services are well set up to say, for example, with these 7 people that they've now arrested, we understand, or several, I should say, to go into their accommodation, their living space, find their social media platforms, find their phones, find out what kind of technological footprint on the beach they left behind them.
Yes, no, I think there's no question. The Sri Lankan police and intelligence services are extremely competent and have all the equipment and expertise and training and international support necessary to track down who did this. I think if it does, I mean, I think the key question is, was this an internally driven attack? Were these Sri Lankans doing violence against other Sri Lankans or against foreigners in order to destabilize Sri Lanka as Sri Lanka, or are we talking in some kind of unknown, hitherto unknown, or a group previously unconnected to violence in Sri Lanka, who, for its own reasons external to Sri Lankan dynamics, thought this was a good thing to do? Or is it some kind of combination, some Sri Lankans angry about Sri Lankan issues working with outside groups, or a final possibility, could there be some kind of hidden hand for sort of working with outside groups for their own sort of less open political motives? So I mean, when you get in this sort of world, it's very hard to know at first glance which of those dynamics is most likely.
And when it comes to the authorities and how they handle this, and indeed, I guess, the politicians, is part of the resonance of this the way that these attacks speak to everyone in Sri Lanka? This speaks to Christians, Muslims, Buddhists. It speaks to people from the north of Sri Lanka. It speaks to foreigners, 30-plus tourists killed as well, we understand. So this gets traction with anyone and everyone in the country.
Yes, absolutely. And And it's important to note, Sri Lanka is famous or best known for the violence between the sort of Tamil separatists, most obviously the LTTE, and government forces. But it's had a long history of violence between Sinhala insurgents and the government, between Buddhist groups attacking Muslims and Christians. What it's never had, though, is our local Muslims attacking other communities. So that's sort of a field that we've never moved into, and hopefully that's not what's happened here. But I think there's real risks that if it does have an Islamic cast, or if it does have an Islamicist, jihadi-like motivation, it's absolutely crucial that the government and all political and civil society leadership do everything to ensure that local Muslims who have shown great perseverance, great calm, great maturity in the face of attacks on their communities over the last few years, that they not be targeted in any kind of reprisals, and that they not be blamed for the work of others for which they should not be held responsible.
Alan, again, many thanks. We'll keep you right across all the developments coming to us out of Colombo and the areas surrounding it, so do stay with us here on Al Jazeera. In the meantime, let's tell you what we've got coming up in the next 15 minutes. How Iraq is working to better accommodate millions of tourists visiting one of its biggest religious sites. The spotlight is on this year's Beijing International Film Festival, but some of China's biggest stars are notably absent from the red carpet.
The right to adequate housing. What is adequate? Who decides what is adequate?
Housing is not just about four walls and a roof. It's about living in a place where you have peace, security, and most importantly, dignity.
UN Special Rapporteur Leilani Farha talks to Al Jazeera.
The place where decision makers, opinion leaders, and journalists come together every year for honest conversations on global affairs and the future of the Arab region. The 13th